Let's pick up on this conversation now. Gauteng Police Commissioner Elias Mawela is this morning expected to present the province's first quarter crime statistics. This will focus on the number of crimes committed during the period between April and June this year. Let's get some perspective now on what we're likely to hear and why that particular picture. And we speak to Research Associate at the Center of Criminology at the University of Cape Town. Dr. Simon Howell is my guest. Dr. Howell, thank you very much for your time. Let's start with contact crimes, in particular the violence that is targeted at women and children. Is that getting better in terms of policing or getting worse?
I think the problem in South Africa is not so much whether it's getting better or worse, but the low levels of reporting that occur around this crime. So, we don't really have a clear idea of exactly what is going on because so little crime of this nature is reported in the first place. The police have made some effort to engage with and deal with this problem, but, ultimately, this is but the tip of the iceberg, it seems, in comparison to what is actually going on beyond what the police understand and know.
So, what is it then that police are not doing, in your view, and what they should be doing?
I think the police they have made steps and they have made strides in engaging with a number of criminal issues and another crime-related issues. I think the concern remains around, for the police themselves, resources and, the sort of leadership issues that have plagued the organization for a number of years. But ultimately, the biggest concern is the relationship between the police and the community and communities. And that relationship has been one that has been undermined over the course of the last decade or so, and ultimately undermines policing as a whole. So until such time as they get that right and then start beginning engaging with communities in a manner that builds relationships again, then there will always be problems, I think, in South Africa.
Okay, so let's explore those relations between the police and the communities in which they serve. If, as you say in your first response, that crimes are not being reported in large parts of South Africa, what is the reason behind that? Is it despondency, that people simply don't believe that police are going to change the situation in any case?
I think there's multiple factors. One is despondency, in the sense that people feel that the police are ineffective or won't continue to pursue a topic or an investigation, or that they don't have the skills or the resources, or that it's a waste of time. There's also a concern around, there's an antagonistic relationship between many communities and the police, and that the police are seen as something beyond the community that is out there and that is ultimately a threat to the community. In those instances, policing is considered to be something that is negative, and in that instance, there is very little reporting. So, there's a multiple range of factors as to why police and the public don't engage with one another, but ultimately, it is becoming quite a significant issue in South Africa. In the higher cohorts of economic strata and the like, then, there's a concern around people just reporting crimes for insurance purposes rather than actually allowing an investigation to go ahead. So, across the population, there are concerns around how the police interface with communities and individuals, and whether the community and the South African public as a whole trust the police.
Before I move away from the subject of contact crimes, because this is what really strikes fear into the hearts of many communities, there's no worse feeling than knowing that an intruder has entered your home and you have no clue what weapon they may have, and the primary concern, of course, is the protection of your family. But these crimes, Dr. Howell, are not just targeted at South African communities. I suppose the tourists or visitors in South Africa, they become casualties. And there's a German tourist whose remains, if indeed they are still alive, perhaps that is the hope, but I suspect even the family has lost hope now. There's a German tourist who's not been found. There's a tourist who was killed in Cape Town during the violent taxi strike. There's just a number of these that also are just, I don't know whether it is indiscriminate of the criminals in South Africa that they target any and everyone. The kind of picture that then gets painted about our country beyond our borders, how damaging is that?
Yeah, this is one of the big problems. I don't think that that tourism as a whole, the tourist sector, are specifically targeted. If you think of the number of tourists that are victims to contact crime or violent crime in relation to the number of locals or the South African population that is victim to these crimes, it pales in comparison. But that being said, it does create a lot of media attention, and it does create a very bad image for South Africa at a time when South Africa's economy needs a good image in international eyes, so as to increase and bolster tourism as a whole. It's reputational damage as much as anything else, which South Africa suffers as a result.
And then when we move away and look at other crime categories, cash in transit, has that picture improved, or you think that there's just a lull?
I think it could be. I think it has improved. The police have dedicated a number of resources to engaging with this issue, and have made some strides in sort of dealing with the network of people that ultimately, perpetrate these crimes. As to whether they can continue to be successful, of course, depends on a number of factors. But I think at the moment they are getting the upper hand, at least, so as to engage with and, undermine people doing this, because it is quite a significantly violent act in and of itself.
Carjackings, that seems to be one of the other crimes that do turn deadly. Those people that steal cars in South Africa and move them across the borders. Your assessment of how the South African law enforcement is dealing with that?
Well, I think, we've seen a rise in both kidnappings and carjackings, and they are related to one another in the sense that often carjackings that go wrong end up becoming kidnappings. And as to whether I don't think the South African police have a good handle on this yet. There has been a sort of plateauing of the statistics at the moment, but that doesn't mean, for any sense of the word, that will decrease over time. I think more resources need to be dedicated to this, but also a more integrated approach to deal with the organized crime element to this. It's not simply that people are randomly undertaking these acts, but they're part of syndicates and the like. And so we need to begin dealing with that as a whole, rather than simply as sporadic acts of violence. Yeah,
and then, of course, as you've already mentioned, organized crime, that appears to be something that is taking a foothold in South Africa. How bad is this picture of organized crime? And you can cast your mind as wide as you possibly think. I mean, we have just had the sentencing of, I think, 6 men who were involved, at least around the planning of the assassination of the Gauteng health official, Babita Deokaran. There have also been a number of high-profile arrests in relation to organized crime in South Africa. This whole picture, Dr. Howell, why is it that South Africa is a hub of organized crime?
Well, I think, there are multiple levels of organized crime in this country now. There are low-level syndicates, which are simply copycats of larger organizations. And then there are international and national organizations, which have become, gained a foothold in the country because of lackluster policing, for lack of a better term, and weak border security. And South Africa is quite the destination for organized crime because it's generally quite easy to perpetuate crime in this way. And we have good transport networks and interrelations with the rest of the world. That being said, the police have begun engaging with and dealing with this, but it is very complex to deal with because of its international nature, and because you have to work with multiple forces from, elsewhere in different countries. And there are related diplomatic issues that involved therein. But I think on the whole, South Africa is now a destination for international crime, and one that the police need to begin engaging with at a serious level, so as to become part of the international policing community, and so as to engage with us at its international level, which is where it ultimately operates at.
Yeah. Let's conclude the conversation on one that I think really is scary because of just how impactful it can be in striking fear in people's hearts, and that is people who are hired to assassinate other people. We've already mentioned Babita Deokaran. Is that something that, I want to ask this question as simply as I possibly can, but it is frightening to hear that you have people follow you for one or other reason, and in some instances, kidnappings as well had become a topical point in South Africa, although now not so much. But where it really gets worse is when people are eventually assassinated. How do police deal with this?
Well, it's very difficult, to be honest. I think, they can, to be preemptive in engaging with this crime requires information and intelligence, which is difficult to gather at the best of times, and ultimately relies on people reporting what they suspect or believe or know to help the police. Once it does occur, then, the big concern is, well, who is committing the murder and why? And unfortunately, life seems to become quite cheap in South Africa, and these type of murders are perpetuated by economic differences and different economic concerns, but also that the fact that there is a concern around the value of life and why people seem to be able to do this quite easily now. From a policing perspective, of course, it's going to be very difficult to engage with, deal with, because of the nature of the crime, and that it's sort of hushed and coerced and a function of whether people want their intentions.
Yeah, and oftentimes it is extremely difficult to get to the mastermind. Because these are the people that would have ordered the hit in the first place. Dr. Simon Howell, let me thank you very much for your time and analysis. He is a research associate at the Center of Criminology at the University of Cape Town.